This Wednesday, elections are underway in 10 states of Venezuela for the 3 indigenous legislators to the National Assembly. The director of the Pan American Health Organization has warned that the Americas are experiencing the highest levels of new COVID-19 cases since the start of the pandemic. Ghana's Electoral Commission has confirmed that current President Nana Akufo-Addo secured a second term in office. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. This Wednesday, elections are underway for the 3 Venezuelan indigenous legislators to the National Assembly. Over 3,500 representatives of the country's indigenous communities will elect the 3 deputies from candidates that were selected in general assemblies. The indigenous parliamentary elections are being held on a different date to the regular parliamentary elections, which were held on Sunday, as they follow a unique procedure based on the traditional customs of these communities. According to Article 125 of the Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, indigenous peoples have the right to political participation, and the state shall guarantee indigenous representation in the National Assembly and in the different bodies at federal and local level with indigenous populations. In accordance with the provisions of the electoral law, indigenous peoples conduct their electoral processes with respect for their own traditions.
Importance for us is to elect, for the first time as indigenous people, to elect our representatives. Previously, we did not have that participation. Now we do. For the first time in history, we are the first to elect our representatives at the national level, the regional level, and the municipal level.
Members of Colombia's National Union of Coca, Poppy and Marijuana Farmers mobilized in the capital Bogota to demand respect for life and to denounce the escalating violence in rural areas of the country. The farmers gathered at the headquarters of the Constitutional Court to condemn the ongoing violence in the country and to demand agricultural and environmental justice. In this regard, demonstrators are demanding the fulfillment of the 2016 Peace Accord's 4th clause, which refers to the solution of the issue of drug use and the problem of crops used for illicit purposes. The agricultural workers also took the opportunity to denounce the negative effects of glyphosate, which is used as part of the US war on drugs in the region, on their health. This Tuesday, Chileans commemorated 10 years since the tragic fire that occurred in Tower 5 of the San Miguel prison in Santiago, in which 81 inmates lost their lives. Social movements, relatives of the victims and survivors met to pay tribute to those killed in the fire, which occurred on December 8, 2010, and called for justice and improvements to prison safety to prevent a repeat of the incident. At the time, the San Miguel prison had capacity for 1,110 inmates, but that was exceeded by 800, with many inmates in pre-trial detention. After 10 years of hard legal battles, this past November 14th, the families of the victims were compensated, and the responsibility of the state for the overcrowding of the prison and the lack of evacuation measures was established. In an attempt to evade justice, the director of the National Civil Police of El Salvador, Mauricio Arias-Chicas, resigned from his post as Deputy Minister of Security in the midst of a special plenary session in the Legislative Assembly that sought to prosecute him for the crimes of disobedience and breach of duty. During the legislative meeting, deputies accused Ariasa of usurpation of official functions and ideological falsehood, hours before the police director had submitted his irrevocable resignation from his post as Deputy Security Minister to President Nayib Bukele. The move sought to avoid a trial of 2 ministers of the Bukele cabinet, investigated for fraudulent handling of funds allocated to combat the COVID-19 epidemic, among other offences. The former deputy minister now faces 3 new criminal charges: obstruction of justice, procedural fraud and arbitrary acts, and will be tried in court without having to abandon his functions as director of the police. Guatemala has seen yet another day of protests against the government of President Alejandro Giammattei. Indigenous and rural organizations participated in new roadblocks of highways connecting different regions in the west of the country. The demonstrators continued to denounce the public policies of the current government. They also stressed that under the administration of President Alejandro Giammattei, the most vulnerable sectors do not enjoy economic and social guarantees or the right to decent housing, health and education. In the midst of this situation, they're calling for the formation of a plurinational constituent assembly and for the president's resignation. In Costa Rica, various organisations have mobilised to protest the government plan to negotiate a loan with the International Monetary Fund. Among these organisations, the Costa Rican Women's Movement stands out, which has announced that a loan of $1.75 billion has already been negotiated with the International Monetary Fund without undertaking the multi-sector consultation that was promised by the government. 60 organisations from 9 sectors and the government met in 12 working groups to seek solutions to the different needs of the country. However, the proposed IMF loan was not mentioned in any of these spaces. The organisation has reiterated that the deal the government intends to reach with the IMF puts the economic and social future of the country at risk. The director of the Pan American Health Organization has warned that the Americas are experiencing the highest levels of new COVID-19 cases since the start of the pandemic and called for coordinated efforts to boost hospital capacity in the most affected areas.
Not have enough doses to protect everyone. So the objective is to save lives using the first deployment to reach those most vulnerable to develop severe forms of COVID-19. North America's continued rise in infections is particularly worrisome as winter approaches in the Northern Hemisphere. Seeking refuge from the cold, people may be tempted to gather indoors in poorly ventilated areas, really the perfect conditions for the virus to spread. Brazil is currently reporting its highest incidence of new cases in South America, with cases and deaths mounting. Brazil's health system is under strain and hospitals are at capacity in some areas.
International human rights and humanitarian aid organisations have warned of the possibility that poor countries will not receive a COVID-19 vaccine. According to a report published by the People's Vaccine Alliance, 9 out of 10 inhabitants of some 70 poor countries will not have access to a vaccine. The organisation warned that rich countries have already begun to monopolise the supply of vaccines, making it impossible for poor countries to purchase them. Updated data shows that developed countries, which represent only 14% of the world's population, have acquired 53% of all the most promising vaccines produced so far. In the United States, more and more people are relying on food pantries in the midst of the economic crisis sparked by the COVID-19 pandemic. In the city of New York, where people continue to line up to get their weekly donation of food, organisers have noted that more and more families are relying on this relief.
Or we're getting close to the same numbers that we had in the spring. We're servicing about 1,000 families every week.
It has affected me quite a lot. I don't have a job. I have to pick up the food. The children are not going to school. It's too much for us. We don't have any money. The vaccine, yes, I'm very confident. I have lots of hope that it will work and it will help many people in order to move forward to live a normal life.
Authorities in Ukraine on Wednesday announced tight lockdown restrictions from January in a bid to curb the spread of the novel coronavirus.
For more than 3 weeks, we have been discussing lockdown with businesses representatives, local authorities and epidemiologists. We needed to reach a consolidated decision and support for the government's decision. As a result of our discussion, we took a decision to implement quarantine restrictions from January 8th till January 24th. Let's call it safety winter holidays. We take these intensified measures to prevent a new wave of COVID-19, which may occur after the New Year's holidays. The increased quarantine restrictions will be imposed in order to break the disease chains that may form during the holidays.
Restaurants, bars, malls, gyms, theatres, cinemas and other non-essential businesses will be closed. Mass public events will be banned and schools and other educational facilities will be on vacation, with the exception of daycare centres. Only grocery stores, pharmacies, banks, post offices, hotels and public transport will operate during January's lockdown. Ukraine's health officials have so far reported more than 845,000 COVID-19 cases and over 14,000 deaths. The Museum of Moscow has opened a unique exhibition devoted to the coronavirus outbreak and self-isolation. Photos, installations, illustrations, self-made masks and gloves, jewellery and diaries that explore the virus outbreak and its consequences are all going on display from January 2021 onwards. Some objects tell stories about doctors, volunteers and delivery workers, but also about those who lost their jobs due to COVID-19. The exhibition presents works created by Moscow-based artists, but also by the city's ordinary residents. The exhibition is separated into 4 sections called Panic, Peak, Reduction of Mortality and Afterwards. Each is dedicated to a certain period of the coronavirus epidemic.
This exhibition is a research devoted to reflections on everything that recently happened with all of us in Moscow. First of all, it is focused on the first wave of self-isolation. It was difficult to unite objects because there are objects linked to modern art, but also there are objects which don't fit into the modern art system. In the project there are about 70 portraits, 70 stories, which I took with my heroes. There are very different stories. There are stories linked to doctors, to hospitals. In the project there are many stories of people from all over the world.
This Wednesday, the United Arab Emirates officially approved a COVID-19 vaccine developed by China. The Ministry of Health and Prevention said that analysis of the Phase 3 trial of the vaccine developed by the China National Pharmaceutical Group, Sinopharm, showed that it was 86% effective in preventing COVID-19 infection and 100% effective in preventing mild cases from developing into moderate and severe cases. The analysis also confirmed that the vaccine showed no serious safety concerns. This Wednesday, Ghana's Electoral Commission confirmed that current President Nana Akufo-Addo has secured a second term in office, beating his long-time opponent and main rival, John Mahama. The Commission's chairperson announced that President Akufo-Addo of the centre-right New Patriotic Party had received over 6.7 million votes, representing 51.59%, while Mahama of the centre-left National Democratic Congress received just over 6.2 million, or 47.36% of the vote. Mahama was president for 4 years until 2016, before being succeeded by Akufo-Addo. Both of the previous elections were determined by small margins. Despite the coronavirus pandemic, turnout was high on Monday, with over 13.4 million people casting their ballots, representing 79% of registered voters. Ghana has had 7 peaceful transitions of power since the return of democracy over 30 years ago, and post-electoral grievances have always been pursued through the courts, which is rare in the troubled West African region. This Wednesday, Kenyan healthcare workers mobilised to protest poor working conditions during the COVID-19 pandemic, which they say have caused the deaths of their colleagues. The Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union estimates up to 40 healthcare workers have died from the virus while on the front line of the fight against the epidemic, with the deaths blamed on a lack of adequate personal protective equipment and health insurance. The protests were further fuelled by the recent death of young Dr. Stephen Magusu on Monday. Dr. Magusu, like his colleagues, had not received a salary for the 5-month period he served his duty station in the town of Machakos.
We're here because we feel our government is taking a shoulder and it isn't doing anything. It's giving us a cold shoulder. It isn't trying to protect us who are the frontline soldiers, who are the ones who are going to sacrifice our lives. We are the block between COVID and the country. And as that, we need to be given facilities to fight this pandemic, which we aren't being given.
So we need our government, we need everyone to be aware that we make sacrifices in our line of duty, and we do not mind it because we took an oath. But it's important that we be protected. Adequate protective equipment and adequate healthcare cover. I am here for Mogusu, and today is about Mogusu.
China on Wednesday opposed new sanctions imposed by the United States targeting North Korean coal shipments and reiterated that China has consistently and comprehensively implemented UN Security Council resolutions.
As for the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions, China has consistently and earnestly fulfilled its international obligations in a comprehensive manner. We are firmly opposed to any country imposing unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction on Chinese entities and individuals according to its domestic law. China will continue to firmly protect the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese enterprises and individuals. We hope the new U.S. government will soon return to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and resume compliance with the treaty unconditionally, lift all relevant sanctions, promote the political resolution of the Iranian nuclear issue, and safeguard regional peace and stability with concrete efforts.
Syria and Iran have ratified their political, economic and military cooperation agreements, which they consider vital to overcome the common challenges that both nations face. Our correspondent Hisham Wanas has the details.
Damascus and Tehran stressed the need to reinforce and strengthen their bilateral cooperation as well as with the other countries of the region during the visit of the newly appointed Syrian Foreign Affairs Minister to Iran. Both nations agreed on continuing the fight against the terrorists and the Zionist occupiers together until the liberation of all the occupied territories.
There are people who want to push Damascus away from Tehran, create a rupture of the resistant axis and prevent Syria from recovering its significant role at the regional level, as the United States has planned. However, this visit shows that Syria will not change its position, will not abandon its allies, and will stand firm on the resistance axis.
The Iranian officials with whom the Syrian Foreign Affairs Minister al-Maghdad met confirmed that Iran will be a key ally for Syria in the post-war era, just as it has been in the fight against terrorism.
Without doubt, Iran will not abandon Syria, and the Syrians are grateful for this position, which they trust will help to lift the blockade and put an end to their suffering, and they believe that the visit of the Syrian Foreign Affairs Minister to Tehran is a way to boost bilateral economic cooperation for the benefit of the people of both nations.
Iran will also be involved in the humanitarian help, sending thousands of tons of humanitarian aid to the Syrian people and to the Palestinians living in Syria. Tehran has said it will maintain this assistance until its Arab ally achieves total victory in the crisis that has affected it since 2011, expels the foreign invading forces, and restores peace, security and stability.
Hisham Wanas, teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.